Today, we're talking all about rebranding and why rebranding doesn't always work, why it doesn't always lead to more sales. So, if you're somebody who's considered rebranding your business recently, or you may have already rebranded your business and it didn't lead to more sales, we can talk about why and what you do actually need to do in order to get more sales in your business. So, you definitely want to stick around and watch the full episode or listen to the full episode if you're on the podcast to get all the details on how to make more sales and why rebranding is not always connected to that. So today's question comes from Carol W. She says, I just spent $10,000 on rebranding my website and business logo, but I haven't seen any new sales come in for it. This is very common. Usually when businesses are, a little slow, they're not getting as many leads, they're not generating as many sales. The first thing they think to do is, to rebrand their entire company, that something must be wrong with their positioning. They hire a branding consultant or they hire a graphic designer to redo their website. And they do those sorts of activities and think that that's going to generate more sales. And often it really doesn't. Because there is a huge difference between marketing and sales. People usually think they're the same thing, that they're synonymous with each other. But sales is just one component of marketing. And marketing doesn't always generate new leads, right? There's one component of it, sales, that generates new leads. But the other components of marketing don't always do that. One of the things you learn at the collegiate level or the university level when you take a marketing class is that there are four main components to marketing, and they call them the 4Ps. So the 4Ps of marketing are pricing, your product or positioning, the placement, and promotion. And so where sales happen is usually in this promotion bucket. Like sales pretty much entirely lives within that P. And so if you are actually focused on positioning your product or pricing your product or, how and where your product is sold, those don't always lead directly to more sales. They're sort of indirectly related to sales. That said, you do have to have those other three Ps really honed in. But if you don't have those 3Ps honed in and you're not doing any sort of promotion or sales activities, then you're not going to see any sales of your product. And usually when you want to get more sales, what you really need to do is focus on this last P. So let's talk about these 4Ps just in a little bit more detail. The first one is pricing. So pricing is really about how you price your product, not just by the cost of the pieces that go into it, but also the value of the product and value-based pricing. So if you're not sure how to price your product or your service, the first thing you can look at is definitely how much it costs. But also what you want to do is look at how you want to position your place in the market and how the perceived value is by the customers. So for example, it might only cost you, $100, to complete whatever your service is in terms of, administrative costs or physical costs. And then, there's an hourly rate that you want to pay yourself, right? But that doesn't just mean that you, times that by 2 and that's your profit. And that's, how you price your product or service. You can actually look at it from a value-based perspective and price your product higher or lower depending on who your target market is and who you want to reach. So pricing can get pretty nuanced. And the way I like to think about it is when early in my career, I worked in an advertising agency and we worked for a high-end water company. So I won't say the water company's name because I'm pretty sure I was under some sort of NDA while I was working there. But their entire strategy, because they wanted to be, a luxury brand, was to price their product as high as possible, right? So they wanted to be on the shelf at retail, the highest price one always. And the reason for that is because a higher price communicates higher value, right? So sometimes just pricing your product differently can communicate things to potential buyers. And so that's a really good example to think of and a good case study to think of when you're pricing your products. And you can essentially price them, kind of low, medium, or high, right? You could be the cheapest, or you could be the Walmart. You could be, middle market. You can be premium. even, which is a little slightly above middle market. I think of brands like Kate Spade or Anthropologie is sort of like being in this realm. They're a little bit premium of mid-market. Target is mid-market. And then up from there, you can be luxury or even ultra luxury, right? So when we think about luxury, we think of brands like Chanel or Prada, Gucci, right? The prices reflect that. When it comes to your product and positioning, this part of marketing is all about, what you're actually packaging up, whether it's a physical product or it's, your services, right? So if you're coming up with, what your services are, thinking through all of those different details in what goes into your service, and aligning it to your pricing, right? And then how you're packaging everything. So even if you're talking about a physical package, you would think about, am I going to use a premium box? Am I going to use a branded box around it? Or am I going to put it in a bag, right? So those sort of things, depending on how you want to position your product. But then also, the messaging strategy around it, and the type of language you use, right? All of those things go into your product and your positioning. So rebranding your company, for example, is right within that positioning statement. It's, how your brand looks, how it feels, your marketing materials, like everything like that, your vibe essentially as a brand. And then also, the product itself and the vibe it communicates. And then when you deliver the product or the service, what that experience is like. The third one is placement. And so that's literally just where your product or brand or service is placed. So, if you think about a consumer good, right? If they're selling at retail, that can be everything from, are we selling at retail or are we selling, at specialty stores, or are we selling our own, are we creating our own stores? To, where exactly are we placed on the shelf, right? If you are, a beverage company, are you going to be placed in the refrigerated section, or are you going to be placed in the non-refrigerated section? And those sorts of decisions can actually make a huge difference to your marketing overall. So when I'm thinking about service-based businesses, I'm thinking about, are you selling online? Are you selling in person? Are you taking sales calls? Things like that. Do you have your own website? You're selling on other people's marketplaces? All of those sorts of decisions would come down to placement. And then the last one is promotion, and that's really where your sales come in. So sales pretty much sits 100% in this promotion bucket, and it includes a whole list of different activities. And it's everything from, what platform are you going to promote on, to your actual promotion strategies and messaging, and how you're going to launch your products, how you're going to launch new services, how you're going to communicate to buyers, and things of that nature. So here's some activities that qualify as sales activities, and rebranding your company is not one of them. Redoing your website is not one of them. We're talking about activities like emailing your list of prospective buyers or prospective partners. We're talking about cold or warm outreach of any sort, whether that's via email or over the phone or in person. Getting leads to book a discovery call, doing the actual sales calls, networking with potential partners, attending any sort of show or convention, essentially anything that involves generating new leads and then closing those leads is considered sales. The mistake a lot of businesses make is they think that marketing is the best way to get new clients, and they ignore this sales piece of marketing and only focus on these other 3 P's of the puzzle. They change their pricing, they change where their services are available, right? They do rebrand, they change their positioning, but they didn't do any promotion and they didn't do any sales activities. And so they're not getting any sales and they're not getting any new leads. So let's walk through a couple of examples. And then you can sort of, as I walk through them, decide, which one is a promotion sales activity and which one is more of like a general marketing activity. So if you're an artist, deciding that your logo and your website isn't attracting high-end customers and you want to redo your logo. Or reaching out to interior designers in your area with an offer to provide artwork for their offices in exchange for something, right? So that second one is your example of a sales activity versus a marketing activity, right? Reaching out directly to interior designers to get your products in front of them, to get your products in front of their customers. is a sales activity. Another example is a stationery designer. So example 1, paying for a styled shoot and then using those photos on your website. Or 2, launching a free lead magnet, emailing it to planners, promoting it on Instagram, sharing it in Facebook groups, and then sending weekly emails promoting different products and giving, wedding timeline advice and other valuable freebies. So obviously it's that second one, you're setting up a funnel. Essentially, you're getting people onto your email list, and then you're using that email list to communicate with them and to have a base that you can advertise, new launches or sales or promotional activities in general. So that second one is, firmly within sales. Whereas doing a styled shoot, getting new photos for your website, that's not immediately going to generate new sales. It's not a sales generating activity. Our third example is a photographer. So if they redesign their homepage and curate new images for their website, portfolio pages, and proposals, versus a photographer who attends a bridal show and offers free thank you cards to anyone who books a consultation call at the show. So that third one, for that third example, that second one is a sales generating activity, right? It's going to an actual networking show or convention, and with a very clear offer and booking actual calls at the show, right? That is an example of sales. If you have a question about your business that you'd like me to answer on the show, head over to marketinganswerspodcast.com/ask. I answer real questions like this from creative business owners every single week, and I'm really looking forward to hearing more questions from you guys. I hope you enjoyed this shorty episode. If you're wondering what you can do to make more sales, I have a really great episode on this, and I will link it in the show notes and right here if you're watching on YouTube.